Hey guys, Foxdrop here with a video on the hardest solo queue carry junglers for patch 6.20. And yes, because this is patch 6.20, that means that 2 years ago we released patch 4.20 in season 4, and that was also the patch where Warwick, Mr. Weedwick himself, received a buff, and on top of that, Riot also used the phrase "to be blunt" in their introduction of the patch. So I'm just going to throw those ones out there. I'm going to choose to believe they're not coincidences, but either way, we're not talking about season 4 today, we're talking about season 6. And today we're going to be looking at some of the best junglers for you to be picking for solo queue. Exactly how am I defining what makes a hard carry solo queue jungler? For me, these are the champions that can have really solid individual impact on games, champions that can get it done without needing too much help from their team. This means that you can have quite a reliable amount of success on them, because it doesn't matter who your teammates are, it doesn't matter too much on their performances, you can get it done as long as you're playing well. Before we get into this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to our boys over at Pro Guides. They're helping me with the editing for this video. If you don't know who they are, go check them out. They're all about helping you become better League of Legends players. They also have quite a nifty service where you can talk to high rated players in real time, ask them questions, and they can help you out. But either way, the first champion I want to talk about for this video is going to be Nidalee. Now, Nidalee is someone I would only recommend that you play if you're really good at her. She's someone that does need a lot of practice, someone who has quite a lot of mechanical skill involved, but also someone who you need to just know how she works and how she plays. She's very unique in not only her playstyle, but just really like minor things. For example, how to do your first clear effectively without dying or getting down to like 10 health, which is something that I tend to do when I play her. Needless to say, I'm nothing special when it comes to Nidalee, but that doesn't mean that she's a bad champion. In fact, far from it, she's really good. I think that in my opinion, she's probably the hardest carry jungler in the game if you play her to perfection and do everything really well. There's a reason why she has 55% win ratio, by far the highest win rate out of any jungler in the current patch, because if you play her really well, you can get a lot of stuff done. Another reason why her win ratio may be so high is because I don't play her, so I'm not dragging it down. What makes Nidalee really good is she's very strong in the early game, and she completely destroys the enemy jungler when she finds him as well. So you just want to run around, do whatever you want to do, because no one can stop you, because you're Nidalee. Prey on that enemy jungler where you can, farm up and use her insane clear speeds to help you get ahead in the game, and really just make it so that you're in such an advantageous position over the enemy jungler, either from putting them directly behind or just because you can farm so much faster than they can. But either way, if you're interested in playing Nidalee, here are the runes, masteries, skill order and item build that I'd recommend to pick her up. The next jungler on this list is going to be Volibear. Now Volibear, despite his name being a bear and despite Nidalee also being an animal, isn't too similar to the champion we just mentioned. They're both pretty good in those 1v1s against enemy junglers. Nidalee because she just absolutely obliterates enemy junglers, but Volibear because he doesn't die and actually has quite a surprising amount of damage, especially in that 1v1. And the ability to not die, which Volibear is very good at doing and tends to be quite a handy trait in League of Legends, is something that you'll see a lot in whatever you want to do when it comes to playing volley. He's also really good in these early game ganks, and I think, in my opinion, one of the things that makes him such a good, strong solo queue carry is the fact that he can get so beefy and so tanky, but also be really impactful and really snowball a game out. He's also really hard for you to muck up on, which for me personally, I think is a really good feature to have on a jungler, or even just a champion in general in League of Legends. His mechanics are so ridiculously simple that it's really easy to execute him, and it's hard to muck up on him. I suppose a good way to sum it up would be to say that there is barely any opportunity to muck up when you're playing Volibear. You want to pick Volibear if you like playing very tanky champions, but also if you want someone who is reliable because of how easy he is, and consistent because he doesn't really have too much for you to fail on. If you're interested in picking up the Thunderbear, I'd recommend these runes, masteries, skill order and item build. And moving swiftly on to our third jungler in this list, it's going to be someone that I recently did a full gameplay on to show you just how powerful he is. It's the world's flavor of the month, Skarner. Skarner is someone who kind of came back into the meta because of the other champions that got nerfed, but honestly he's always been really solid for solo queue in my opinion. Skarner's always flown under the radar, and because a lot of other junglers either get banned out now or they've just been nerfed into the ground a little bit too much, cough cough, Gragas, cough cough, not salty about that one at all whatsoever, Skarner's someone you can pick up to kind of fill that void a little bit. Skarner fills that role of being a very good duelist, someone who's quite tanky, but isn't quite as tanky as Volibear and isn't quite as good in the 1v1s as Nidalee is. The greatest element for Skarner has to be his ultimate. It's a really strong catch tool, especially in the late game, and it only gets countered by Quicksilver Sash. Basically, all you gotta do is run up to someone, stick them in your ulti, and just run back, and that's 100% going to be a kill in most situations. And it's not even hard to do whatsoever. Even Fire could play Skarner and make that play. It's an ultimate that doesn't really have too much counter considering how impactful it is. Like I say, the only thing is Quicksilver Sash, but in solo queue most people don't tend to buy that. He also has very good synergies with these move speed enhancing champions or items, and people like Karma are really in meta right now, so they really help Skarner by speeding him up and letting him grab someone. To be honest, even outside of his ultimate by itself, like the active of being able to use it and catch someone, just the threat of being able to use it on an enemy carry will often make them zone themselves away from a fight. They won't want to get too close, because if they do, you can speed up and run them down, or you can flash onto them. It's very threatening for an enemy carry to be anywhere near a Skarner in a team fight. Outside of that, Skarner is another champion who is very consistent and reliable, similar to how Volibear is for similar reasons, because he doesn't really have any particular mechanics for you to muck up on, and he also gets quite tanky. Not quite as tanky as Volibear, but pretty tanky nonetheless. If you're interested in Skarner, these are the runes, mastery, skill order, and item build that I'd recommend to pick up on him. Next up on this list of hard carry junglers, we have the cigarless Graves. Now, whereas Graves' cigar may be completely dead and buried, the champion himself is still really strong. Graves is a champion who's been really strong for pretty much the whole season. What makes Graves really good is his ability to completely control the jungle, control the game. Because he's someone, again, similar to Nidalee, who the enemy jungler can't really do too much against. If Graves wants to do something, if Graves wants something in the jungle, then Graves gets it. Unless people can completely collapse on him and outnumber him, Graves is someone who is really strong in that bully kind of style of game. Unlike the other champions we've mentioned on this list, Graves is one of those people who is an AD champion by nature. He's going to be buying a lot of AD because that's just what he wants to do, right? He's Graves. And whereas that may sound a little bit weird for me to point out, when it comes to jungling, this is actually a really positive feature to have. What it means is that these champions can scale quite well as far as their clear speeds and their dueling goes, because these champions will just have their auto attacks carrying them through. They don't need their abilities to clear very fast. In fact, their abilities are just the icing on the cake. So when someone like Graves gets a lot of AD and just powers through the jungle because his auto attacks do ridiculous damage, and then you chuck in like his buster shot, it's just, you know, that's why he has one of the highest clear speeds in the whole game. Like, imagine that junglers are supermodels and they're judged by how elegant and long their legs are. And then Graves walks through the door and he's got this massive set of jugs as well. That's what Graves' clearing is like compared to other junglers. On top of that, Graves has that very unique mechanic of the quick draw buff, giving him stacking MR and armor. When he's clearing that jungle, especially in the early game, he can easily double his armor, which makes him actually have really healthy clears despite not having any sustain built into his kit. I recently did a Graves gameplay, despite the fact he's one of these champions who I feel like I'm just absolutely terrible on, but I didn't do too bad. So if you want to watch that, see how he plays, it gives a good explanation of what Graves is good at doing, because honestly on paper it's kind of hard to explain why Graves is as good as he is. Just take my word for it, he's pretty bloody strong. But at any rate, if you like playing bruisers or you like playing AD carries, then Graves is kind of a mix between the two, as weird as that sounds, because they're quite polar opposite archetypes. He's also very solid at all stages of the game, so if you like that kind of champion, he's worth picking up. And for your runes, masteries, item build, and skill order, you'll want to go something that looks like this. Before we get into our next champion, as we've just passed the halfway point in this video, I just want to take a little bit of a break to say thank you guys for watching this video. I really appreciate you guys watching my stuff. I know I say it all the time, but genuinely I mean it. If you do like it, don't forget to leave that cheeky thumbs up. Any feedback in the comments as well, I often read those. So yeah, I appreciate you guys checking this video out, and without any further ado, let's move on to our next champion on this list. Another hard carry jungler is going to be Hecarim. Now this feisty fella has clip-clopped his way onto our list because he does two things very well. He does being a bruiser very well, and he does initiating very well. These are two things which are actually really solid and hard to deal with when it comes to playing junglers. Bruisers specifically tend to be very good against enemy carries. It's a mix of being tanky and having a lot of damage. These are champions who, if they get quite far ahead, tend to snowball really hard. And initiation is another thing which is really solid for solo queue, because having the ability to pick your fights where you want them, to be able to take team fights which might be beneficial for you, rather than just having to sit back and wait for someone else to do it in solo queue, because we all know you can't really rely on your teammates in solo queue. That's another thing which is really solid. The only downside to Hecarim is he doesn't really have any defensive options. Hecarim's very much one of these champions who's just go or no. He's someone who wants to jump into the back line, take that fight on the enemy AD carry or the enemy mage, whatever it may be, but not necessarily wants to protect his team too much. But honestly, this is what makes him such a good carry, is that he's very good at doing that. He also has some pretty solid ganks as well, so like I said, with bruisers, if they tend to snowball, they get very strong. Hecarim can certainly facilitate himself for his own snowball. Now Hecarim can do that both through ganking and through farming, which might be a little bit surprising to hear, especially the second part. Farms and horses don't really go hand in hand, unless of course you are a meat supplier for McDonald's. But anyway, here are the Runes Masteries item build and skill order that you'll want to run on Hecarim jungle. So moving on to our penultimate jungler for this list, it's someone that I mentioned before in a previous video. It's going to be the stealthy succubus, Evelynn. He's one of these champions who kind of came out of nowhere. Now that's not really an intended pun, but I'm going to say that it is because I like to pretend that I'm more intelligent than I actually am. She's someone who really flew under the radar for the whole of Season 6. She's not someone who was strong, then got nerfed, has now come back into the meta like Elise. She's someone who is just was nowhere and now she's everywhere. Eve right now functions as one of these really capable AP assassins, but also somewhere between assassin and initiation. Like, she's someone who can build somewhat tanky if she needs to, but mostly in solo queue the focus is her ability to avoid wards and to kill people in those 1v1s very fast. The proto belt, which came through the mage update, is a core item in her right now, and it makes her able to not only just burst people down ridiculously fast, but also keep onto them so she can keep applying those hate spikes. Now because Eve is probably the premier pure stealth champion in the game, she plays very uniquely, if that's even a word, and it also forces the enemy team to play very uniquely. I'm now making it a word. She's someone who completely bypasses wards, which makes it really hard to see when Eve is setting up for a play and trying to make something happen. The only time you ever see Eve is when she is making a play, or if you do have a good ward down, put a ward down in her jungle camps and you'll see her clearing her jungle creeps. Of course, she'll also be spotted out by pink wards, but people don't really tend to buy pink wards in solo queue, so you don't have to worry too much about that. And even so, if you know where the pink ward is, you can just go a different route and still get a successful gank off. For example, if you know there's a pink ward in the river, you just go through Tribush, or if you know there's a pink in the Tri, just go through the lane or something like that. But if you want more information on how to play Eve, more of a guide, then you should watch my other video, like full spotlight I did on her, because it goes into much more detail than I'll do in this video here. But anyway, moving on to our last hard carry jungler for this list. It's probably the best all-round meta jungler right now, in my opinion. It's going to be Elise. Now Elise is someone who is very good in the early game. I think she's probably the best early game jungler as far as pure ganking goes, and her 1v1 matchups aren't necessarily too bad either. She can struggle against the really heavy bully champions, people like Graves, people like Nidalee, but she's still pretty serviceable in 90% of those jungle matchups. She's also someone who's quite flexible in the way she can be played. She's quite good as an assassin, like an AP champion, but she's also good as one of those like hybrid assassin AP champions. Someone who gets like these Rileys, items like that, which make her quite tanky, but also give her that AP. I think Elise is probably the simplest champion for me to talk about in this list, so she doesn't really need much explaining. She's just very good in that early game, and outside of the early game, she's good at being a stun bot, and also if you've built with more damage and you're not too far behind, you can also take on the enemy carries and 1v1 them quite easily. But if you want to see Elise in more detail, then you should watch the full gameplay that I did on her. It was 2 patches ago, but nothing's changed, so it's still pretty relevant. And for your runes, your masteries, your item builds, and your skill order, just check the stuff on screen now. But yeah, that's what I want to say for this video, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, feel free to give me that cheeky thumbs up. You can subscribe to me for more educational league content. You can find me on Facebook, on Twitter, and catch me streaming at twitch.tv/Foxdrop. All those links are down below in the description, but most importantly, boys and girls, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and I will see you in my next video.